In 1678, word began to spread through London of a sinister Popish, meaning Catholic plot to murder the Protestant King Charles II and place his Catholic brother James on the throne. It convulsed the politics of Britain and Ireland for the next 3 years and cost numerous innocent men their lives. What's even more remarkable was that almost all of it was lies. The Popish Plot was the invention of 2 men, Titus Oates, a failed clergyman and compulsive liar, and Dr. Israel Tong, an anti-Catholic academic and chaplain who believed Jesuit priests had started the Great Fire of London. Their claims were outlandish and entirely without substance, so how did they manage to exert such a grip on the imaginations of so many people? In part, it was because they played upon a deeply entrenched fear. The Protestant majority in Britain had long harboured suspicions about their Catholic countrymen. After more than a century of being one of the few Protestant nations surrounded by frequently hostile Catholic powers, fears of invasion were easily roused. If Catholics once again gained the upper hand in the country, they speculated, what would stop them forcibly converting Protestant Englishmen or even burning them at the stake? It was bad enough that Charles II was himself married to a Catholic, Catherine of Braganza, who was known to have priests in her entourage. The king clearly had Catholic sympathies, having twice tried to relax the penalties for those who did not conform to the Protestant Church of England and had twice been forced to backtrack. Worse still, when legislation was passed in 1673 demanding that all office holders should take communion, Charles's brother James was revealed to be a practicing Catholic and was forced to resign as Lord High Admiral of the Royal Navy. But there was nothing to stop him becoming king. Charles had not fathered a legitimate heir. If this was still the case when he died, James would succeed him. Into this perilous political moment stepped Titus Oates, a boorish man. His abhorrent behaviour had ended his career in the Church of England and, after he had sought sanctuary within the Catholic Church, it also ruined his attempt to become a Jesuit priest. His brief training, however, had armed him with just enough knowledge of Catholic networks in Britain to use to his advantage. By 1678, he was in London and destitute. That's when he fell in with Dr. Israel Tong, whose bottomless appetite for tales of Catholic conspiracy Oates was happy to supply. Tong's encouragement was all Oates needed to concoct the entirely false claim that he had uncovered a Jesuit-led plot to murder the king. He reported the conspiracy to a magistrate, Justice Edmund Berry Godfrey, and through an acquaintance to the king and his councillors. Charles II was unconvinced, but instructed his chief minister, Thomas Osborne, Earl of Danby, to investigate. Danby found no evidence, but this did not stop rumours of the plot spreading. Fuel was added to the fire when Oates was commanded to appear before the Privy Council to make his case. His bravado failed to persuade Charles, but some of the king's ministers were more credulous. The men Oates named as conspirators were detained and interrogated. They protested their innocence, but Oates got lucky. One of the accused, Edward Coleman, had served in James's entourage. Coleman was found to have written letters calling for the removal of Charles in favour of his brother. The letters were addressed to the confessor of the French king, Louis XIV. The proposals were not taken seriously by the French and reflected Coleman's zeal as a convert to Catholicism, but they were enough to corroborate Oates' allegations. Fortune smiled on Oates again when Justice Godfrey was found murdered in mysterious circumstances. Godfrey was hailed as a Protestant martyr and Oates was acclaimed the saviour of the Protestant nation. The House of Commons championed him, overlooking the contradictions and implausibilities in his accusations. The House of Lords praised him for his services. Oates also proved useful to some of the very highest in the land who were vehemently opposed to James becoming king. By conflating Oates' allegations with James's Catholicism, Anthony Ashley Cooper, the Earl of Shaftesbury, tried to embarrass Charles into excluding his brother from the succession. Charles resisted, but too many people now believed in the Popish Plot for it simply to be dismissed. His opponents wanted blood, and Charles had no choice but to oblige. The men Oates had accused became expendable. Treason trials began in November 1678. Over the next 3 years, more than 30 men, many of them priests, were arrested, interrogated, tried, and executed. The first of these unfortunates was a goldsmith from Covent Garden. Having had his debts called in because he was a Catholic, he blamed the king and publicly threatened him. That fit of anger cost him his life. His trial, like many others associated with the plot, was overseen by Sir William Scroggs, the Lord Chief Justice of the Court of King's Bench. Scroggs was keen to demonstrate his loyalty to the Crown and was willing to find guilt where little proof existed. But as the flimsy evidence in case after case came under legal scrutiny, he lost his faith in Oates. The obvious lack of substance did not, however, save many of those accused. The exceptions are instructive. Sir George Wakeman, for instance, was physician to the Queen. Oates accused him of being paid £15,000 by the French to kill the king. This was a step too far, as it brought the accusations close to the king's own family. Charles was very relieved when Scroggs, braving public outrage and attempts to have him removed from office, dismissed the case. In time, the hysteria dwindled. Shaftesbury made repeated attempts to pass legislation through Parliament that would exclude James from the succession, but he ultimately failed and was forced into exile in 1682. His actions did have one lasting effect, however. Shaftesbury supporters became known as Whigs, and the Kings as Tories, a division that soon hardened into permanence. The exclusion crisis created the nation's first political parties. James did indeed become king in 1685 and pursued Oates for perjury. Oates was convicted, sentenced to life imprisonment, and pilloried 5 times a year. He was released when the Protestant King William III deposed James 3 years later, but by then he was a broken man. Titus Oates, whose fevered fantasies had once made the kingdom tremble, died in obscurity in 1705.